Hello everyone, and welcome to, or back to the channel. In this challenge video, we're going to be playing 7 Days to Die on insane difficulty, but only using archery. More specifically, I'm only going to be using bows and not including crossbows in that. I am allowed to use traps like wood spikes, but I am not allowed to damage enemies with any weapons other than a bow and arrow. However, something like a knife can still be used for cleaning carcasses. With that bit of introduction out of the way, let's get right into the video. I began this run like any other by quickly grabbing some plant fibers, stone, and wood to craft a stone axe and complete the intro quest. After completing the intro quest, I went to quickly loot the house that I spawned next to. I got pretty lucky and found the archery book that allows you to craft steel arrows pretty much immediately. After that was done, I began making my way towards the trader, grabbing some wood and as many feathers as I could find along the way. Having enough feathers to make the arrows I needed would become a huge pain, especially during the early parts of this run. After meeting with the trader, I did the first intro buried supplies quest, and then headed back. After the completion of that quest, I went to try and finish one more before the end of the first day. At this point, the arrows basically feel like they're tickling some of the stronger zombies. After spending most of my arrows, I finished that quest and then ended up hiding the rest of the night in that POI. Come the morning of day 2, I went to the Wildfire Camping Store, which is a POI that was right next to the trader in this pre-gen world. I intended to clear it out and turn it into my home base. That way I would have easy access to the trader at all times. I ended up having most of the zombies follow me outside so that I could fight them in the open, where I would be able to continue to back up and just lob arrows at them until they eventually died. After quite a while, and some help from some wood spikes to slow them down and do a little bit of damage, I was eventually able to clear out the location. After finally clearing them all out, I set down some chests and began to turn this POI into my house. After all that was done, I headed over to the Jacobs residence to try and complete one more quest before the end of day 2. With the help of sneak attacks, I was beginning to move through the zombies a little bit faster, though they were still incredibly tanky at this point in the run. After finishing that quest, I went back home to set up a campfire and grill some meat that I had found that day, but apparently some of the zombies wanted to join in on the barbecue as well. They nearly broke into my house so quickly that I had to just make a run for it. I spent the rest of the night hiding out on top of this fire truck until I looped back around once morning came. I grabbed my food, and I also finished breaking into the reinforced chests that I had started breaking into during the night. It had some pretty decent loot. The next quest I tried to do had a dog there, which is a huge pain to deal with this early on in the game, especially when you only have access to a bow. Thankfully, I was able to get on top of this ambulance that was right at the edge of getting out of the quest area. Once the dog was dealt with, the rest of it was fairly easy to do. I even got my first one-shot kill now that my sneak damage was up to 4.5 times. After grabbing the loot, I went back to base and dropped off a dew collector real quick so it could start collecting while I was gone, and then headed off to do one more quest. This was the first time that I really ran out of arrows in the middle of a quest and wasn't able to craft anymore. So I ended up having to just lure the enemies outside, run in, grab the supplies, and then leave. On the morning of day 4, I went to the mausoleums to do another retrieval quest, and once again had to avoid most of the enemies because I still was low on arrows. I then did another quest where all I did was break through the wall to grab the courier satchel and avoided all of the zombies altogether. After that, I went to pick up my first supply drop, which had some decent supplies in it. I then went to complete one more mission before the end of the night, a clear mission at the cabin retreat. I heavily utilized the tactic of shooting enemies through the holes in doors to defeat all the enemies at this location. I really liked the look of this POI and the kind of Lone Ranger vibe that it gave, which is essentially what this character is. So I decided to move my base to here, even though I had already set up at the other POI. While I was going through my materials, I also realized I finally had enough to upgrade to a regular wooden bow. This was a huge upgrade over the primitive bow, as I now had enough damage to consistently get one-shot sneak attack kills. As long as I hit them in the head, of course. Things got a little tight up in the attic, so I ended up using some of the wood spikes. I'm trying not to rely on them too heavily, because I see how cheesy they can be. The next retrieval quest was super easy. I snuck in and sneak killed a couple of zombies, grabbed the satchel, and got out of there. I spent the night of day 6 reorganizing my stuff now that I had moved bases, and resetting up my dew collector at the new base. I also had finished the first tier of quests with the last one that I completed the day before, and so I picked the bicycle as my reward. I put that bike to good use immediately, riding the over 4 kilometers that it took to get to Trader Jen's. Along the way, I was forced to ride through the wasteland, because in order to get to the burnt forest in this map, you need to go through the wasteland first. I'm playing on the second pre-gen map for the 10k size, by the way. Eventually, though, I did arrive at Jen's. Since I was already in the Burnt Forest region, I decided to grab a retrieve supply mission from Jen. I was able to make relatively short work of the zombies there and then grab the supplies. I then went straight to another supply mission, which also went pretty well, and after completing that, I made my way back home. Along the very long bike ride through the wasteland, I saw several bears and knew I could not stop for a second. Eventually, I made it back home and started getting my gear together for Day 7 Horde. On the morning of Day 7, I went to the fire station and began to clear it out, as I planned to turn this building into my Horde base. The reason that I decided to use this building to turn into a Horde base is because the walls are pretty strong, it's a pretty good, solid, square building, and I like that it has a tower that I could potentially turn into a different type of base in the future. I slowly cleared out the building and the surrounding area around the fire station before climbing up to the top of the tower, where I got surprise attacked by a vulture and nearly fell off. Once I was sure that the whole area was clear, I began removing all ways for zombies to get up to the second floor. I also took my bike out to quickly go grab the supply drop. I stopped back by my base to swap out supplies and craft a level 5 wooden bow, a pretty big upgrade from where I was at level 2. I went back to the fire station and finished getting everything prepared for the start of the Horde. I started out the Horde night on this side of the building, sniping who I could, but realized it wasn't the best possible position, so I headed over to the other side and began using the flame trap to the best of my abilities. This worked out quite well. That's why I left the flame pipe there in the first place, so that I would get a free flame trap in my Horde base. Eventually, I did go back over to the other side for a bit and snipe this guy trying to get up the ladder, but I still spent most of the night on this side. Before long, the Horde night was over, and I had successfully survived my first blood moon using only a bow and arrow. After cleaning up the remaining stragglers, I checked the outside of the building to see if any serious damage had been done, and it didn't really look like there was. Next, I got a mission to head to a POI that I had not yet seen. It's called Our Best Moments, and it's a lakeside cabin, and it looks pretty cool. I did briefly consider moving my base again, and then realized that is completely unnecessary. Getting to the satchel was easy enough, but once I started making my way down into the basement, things got a little tougher, and I ran into my first ferals outside of a Horde night. Eventually, though, I was able to clear out all the zombies, grab the end loot, and get out of there. Towards the end of day 8, I went quickly to the post office to try and complete one more mission. I hopped over the fence into the next location, which was actually part of the same POI, and was unfortunately greeted by a dog. As if being trapped in a small fenced-in area with a dog was not already a problem enough, I also ran out of arrows. I was just barely able to sneak my way up on top of this water tank, and then crafted some more arrows to kill the dog while I was hiding up there. I was starting to run out of time before nightfall, but I was able to draw most of the zombies down these sharp corridors along this trailer here, and be able to snipe them in the head over and over again. Eventually, I was able to clear them all out. When I headed back that evening, I was able to craft a forge for the first time. The morning of day 9, I headed over to the Working Stiff Superstore with the goal of finding some more Forged Ahead books so I could unlock the workbench finally. After making my way through all the zombies on the bottom floor, I was finally able to find the last Forged Ahead books that I needed in the Working Stiff crates in the final loot room. I now had all the magazines I needed to get the workbench, but I still needed more magazines to upgrade my archery to a compound bow, and to upgrade my armor to the assassin armor. I chose to keep doing quests and hoped that I would find more skill magazines along the way. After also completing a buried supplies mission, I went to the Towersley estate to continue to look for more books. Thankfully, I was able to find the last armored up magazine that I was looking for. Then I tried to sneak past this fire trap and found that that's not how fire works apparently, and you can get burned even if you were beyond the edge of it. I also got stuck and nearly died. I was only able to barely escape by falling down and broke a limb in the process. After healing back up, I made my way back upstairs and used building blocks to get over, which is what I should have just done the first time. When I got back to my base, though, I was happy to finally be able to craft a full set of the assassin armor at level 3. Now that I had my new armor with some extra sneak damage, I wanted to test out how I could do against my first infested clear. Thankfully, the game threw me a softball and sent me to a very easy POI. I was able to one-shot most of the zombies with the exception of the 2 final biker zombies in the other garage. These guys were tough, and one of them was feral, but now that I had parkour up to a higher rank as well, I was pretty much able to get away from them whenever I needed to. Before long, I had finished my first infested clear without any issues. Shortly after that, I was again reminded why I'm very glad I chose to upgrade the parkour skill. I then went to complete a second infested clear at the Gilbert residence. Things started off pretty well, and I could definitely tell the improvement of my stealth armor keeping me from getting noticed by certain zombies. But as I made my way towards the last room, things got a little bit messy. I tried putting blocks in front of the door, but unfortunately they were still breaking through the block above the door. Before long, they busted through, and I began leading them outside so I could fight them with a little more space. Once the cop zombie had exploded, that was another infested clear done. I spent that night hunting for animals, mainly because I needed the leather more than I needed the meat, as I was finally getting ready to upgrade to the compound bow. On the morning of day 12, I set off to do one more clear and retrieve quest while I was searching for the last things that I needed to complete the compound bow. After I finished the quest, I returned home and was finally able to upgrade to the compound bow. This is my first time using the compound bow, as I wasn't able to get it on my previous 1.0 runs. I had gotten so used to using the crosshairs with the other two bows and not having any sort of sight or scope that it took a little bit getting used to at first. But once I did, I realized that this is a huge upgrade over the wooden bow. Its power and sighted capabilities are especially seen during stealth segments, where you can easily lock onto the heads of every zombie in the room and take them out before they even notice you. After completing that clear and retrieve, I had officially finished Tier 2 of the quests, and decided to select the nail gun as my reward, as none of the rest of the things are either allowed for the run or I thought would be that helpful. Now that I was done with Tier 2 quests, I decided to head back to Jen so that I could talk to her and get the quest to go meet with Bob and start up to Tier 3 quests. Unfortunately, once I got there, I found out that Bob was another 4.5 kilometers away, meaning that the whole thing in total was going to be 8 kilometers from my home that I was going to have to return to. It was about this point when I began seriously regretting choosing a 10K size world. Eventually, I did make it to Bob and completed the quest, but I ended up pretty much turning right around and starting to head back home, because it was already day 13, late in the evening, and I wanted to be home by day 14. That way I could be ready for the Horde. The morning of day 14, I went back to the Working Stiff Superstore and started to clear it out again, this time with an actual mission. Let's just say that this time around, things went a lot more smoothly with the compound bow compared to the wooden bow. After finishing things up there, I thought I would have time for one more mission, so I grabbed one more that led me to the Happy Sleep Motel. Unfortunately, though, the Happy Sleep Motel is such a large POI that even though it wasn't a particularly difficult mission, it was so time-consuming that I ended up getting stuck here the entire rest of the day. Realizing that I wasn't going to have enough time to finish the mission, but not wanting to leave the area so that I would fail the mission, I went up to the roof to secure it and stay here for the Horde night. Overall, it proved to be a fairly uneventful Horde night, as most of the zombies kind of just got lost somewhere in the lower floors, and I wasn't able to snipe them that effectively from the roof. I did eventually find this position here, where I was able to get most of my kills. Before long, the Horde night was over, and I headed downstairs to start clearing out the stragglers and to finish the mission that I never had actually completed before. I also found this dude who was just stuck in the falling position. Glad to see we still have those bugs in 1.0. Eventually, I found the rest of the zombies that were stragglers from the actual mission aspect of it, and finished the quest. Once that quest was completed though, I headed home and figured that was a good time to wrap up this video. I had successfully survived 2 full weeks using only a bow and arrow. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and if you'd like to see more of this character, or another weapon-restricted run, either in 7 Days to Die or another game that I like to play, like Skyrim or Fallout, let me know in the comments below. Thank you again so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.